Hey, ScouterStan here. The subject of scouting is fascinating, especially in America. It all goes back quite a while, quite a ways, well over, 100 years. It has been around for a long time in the United States. And in order to understand the founding of scouting in the United States, it's important to look at the big picture. So it all starts back with the foundation, the beginnings of what they call the YMCA, or the Young Men's Christians Association. Back in 1844, Sir George Williams started the Y, or what we call the Y, the YMCA. And it was really just to give a structure to help the bodies and minds and spirits of young men, especially in Britain. London is where it was based. That's kind of where it all began, okay, where movements like scouting were starting up. In the mid-1800s, the environment that it was established in was not conducive to producing good young people with a good, fruitful future. So the YMCA was critical in that role. Shortly after that, in the United States, because it's also very industrial, we started a man by the name of Ernest Seton in 1902, right around turn of the century. He started a group called the Woodcraft Indians with a book that was called the Woodcraft Berch-Bark Rolls. I think that's the name of it. But that was what he started in 1902. Then shortly after that, you have Daniel Beard, Daniel Beard. Beard in 1905 started the Sons of Daniel Boone, and they had a nice hat and all that. It was a big deal. Those two groups, they were young, they were brand new, but those two groups quickly adopted some of the basic principles from a general in England. That general was Baden-Powell, or BP. He preferred to be called BP. Baden-Powell. Lord Baden-Powell from England started to do some experiments. He discovered that there was a movement going on after he left the military. He had wrote some books about scouting for the military. They were being incorporated by the British youth, and he discovered this system was working rather well. So he did an experiment in the founding year of scouting in Britain in 1907. That's when the very first experiment, known as the Brown Sea Island Camp, that was the first experiment. Fascinating subject. I can do a whole episode on just that. He then wrote a book that he had been working on before the experiment and used the experiment to finalize a booklet series called Scouting for Boys. And it was, I think it was 6 parts, and it was just a magazine came out every 4 or 5 days. So it was a huge hit. It went into mega reprints, and when they put it in book, it snowballed from there. It just got bigger and bigger. In 1908, the first official scout troops started appearing all over Great Britain, and they had finalized everything. They even had an office for Baden-Powell, and that's kind of where it all began. So knowing the background, how did that end up coming to the U.S.? Why aren't we the Sons of Daniel Boone? Okay, which wouldn't be bad, okay? But it was amazing how it all started. There was a newspaper writer that was over in England, William D. Boyce. And Mr. Boyce was seeing different people in London. And during that time that he was over there, it was extremely foggy, and he got lost in the fog. He could not read the street signs. He couldn't see the buildings. I mean, it was bad. And because of the fog, he was walking along, and a young scout, a British scout, tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, are you lost?" And he said, "Yes, I'm desperately lost. Can you help me? I need to get to this address." So he shows him the address. And, of course, he takes him there. Well, it was just wonderful. I mean, this unknown British scout came out of the fog to help Mr. Boyce find a location. So he gets there, and he wants to give the scout a tip. Now, he didn't know it was a scout. He just thought it was just some kid. So he was trying to give him a tip. He says, "Oh, no." The scout says, "I cannot take a tip because this is my good turn." Mr. Du Bois was so stunned by this generosity that he wrote about it when he got back to the U.S. And it snowballed, just like Baden-Powell's book. And he got to meet with Baden-Powell, and he got to get all this information, and it just snowballed. So with him, he actually pulled in some people for the starting of scouting. The very first incorporation of scouting was in 1910. That's when it started in the U.S. That incorporation was done through Mr. William D. Boyce. He was the one who got the incorporation. He had a group of people, of course, Du Bois, the man who did the incorporation, Stetson, Beard, and a man by the name of Charles Eastman, who was a Dakota native with the YMCA. So those four people kind of formed and put together and got the books together. Baden-Powell was involved in writing some of the things and using some of the stuff from Baden-Powell and putting that together into an actual organization. Then when the Du Bois then handed that over, the development of the organization, he handed it over to Edgar Robinson and Lee Hammond. And those two put it together in a straightforward procedural way, okay, that it can be used for American youth. Later on, side note here, Lee Hammond, he was the founder and wrote a lot of stuff about campfire girls, okay? That's where that comes from. Of course, that wasn't incorporated until, I think it was 1912. So, but that being as aside, those two people kind of put the structure in action. And from that structure, the group hired the very first Scout executive to execute this plan, to make it work for America. The very first Scout executive, of course, was James West. James E. West, I think he was his middle name. Anyways, James West was the very first one, and that was in 1911. Okay, now later, Congress got involved. Okay, chartered system. We've talked about that in season 1. We briefly talked about it this year. So think about the chartered system. The charter system for American Scouting started in 1916. Okay, it was a charter from the Congress of the United States, signed into law by the president, signed into law, incorporated and chartered through the United States government. Now, since 1910, there's been mission statements. There's been a total of, I think, 3. Now, if you use the same words and kind of understand where they were coming from and the different time periods, they basically, all 3 of the statements are the same, okay? Even today's mission statement for scouting is still the same. So that being said, let me put it up on the screen here. And you know this because you went through training, right? So as scout leaders, you know this. All right, so let's go over real quick, okay? To prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetime by installing in them the values of the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. That is the mission statement then and now. It's basically the same. That's what we do as adult leaders. We need to help our youth become aware and instill in them the Scout Oath and Scout Law so that they can use it for the future. Could you imagine this country? Could you imagine any country or any young people in that country believing in the Scout Oath and Scout Law, what that country could do? It would be amazing. And I believe that's the mission we are on. So keep up the hard work, leaders. And now that you know that was a kind of a conglomerate history is never nice and neat. It's not like this, and this. It's always, this came from there, and this, and so on, okay? But that being the case, hang in there, and I will see you on the trail.